now not talk about the fragrance pyramid, right? Now, the fragrance pyramid is something that you would have seen in almost all fragrances that would say top notes, heart notes, and base note, or top, middle, and base notes, right? Or that kind of thing, right? So typically, you will see this fragrance pyramid on almost every fragrance, and there, whatever it is, the description that's kind of given this way. Now, here it is important for us to understand why it is so, right? Now when we think about how is a fragrance made, I told you earlier that it's almost like a cake where you have different ingredients. But whenever there are people who make fragrances, which is who are basically who are into perfumery, who is a perfume basically a person who invents fragrances, or creates fragrance oils. He would basically work with a lot of components to try and extract fragrance oils, right? Now, when the process of fragrance oil creation, okay, what happens is there are certain fragrance oils, like especially like citrus and all of that. They last very low, right? They last hardly for a few minutes in the air, right, in the skin, right? Now, that is one. There are the second category of oils that are created, which last, let's say, between 20 to 30 minutes time, or 30 to 40 minutes time. Then there are certain heavy notes, like your woody notes, for example, or your wood, your leather, that kind of notes, which last for 4 hours, 5 hours, kind of note, right? So when a person is creating a fragrance, a perfumer is creating fragrance, he is basically going to bring in some fragrance that will last like for 10 minutes, then some for 25 minutes, and then for 30 minutes, and he'll create the scent, right? Now, this composition, when this happens, is when you will notice that there are certain top notes used. Now, the top notes on this particular fragrance will last only for 5-10 minutes, or 15 to 20 minutes, and then the second part, which is your middle notes, kind of open up, right? And they last for about 30-40 minutes, and then your base notes open up, right? So that is pretty much how the fragrance is built, and that's why the pyramid is basically there. Now, when this fragrance oil, the concentrations that I was talking to you about, which is either your EDP, which is your 20% concentration, or 15% concentration, this is what actually happens, where the fragrance is basically going to release and move from, or transition from, one note to another, and basically come and give you a full-fledged fragrance that will last from the skin from the 0 hour to 5 hours or 6 hours, whatever. This transition that happens is basically of these notes, which are basically going to last only for certain duration, right? So that's why you will see that certain type of notes are typically used in the base, like woody notes, leather notes. Oud is used in the base because they last longer. Okay, now fragrance notes like floral notes or fruity notes are generally used at the top because they last for much lesser time, right? So this is how a fragrance is kind of built, and this is about how to understand about what a note breakdown is of a particular fragrance, right? Next, basically, let's understand the primary four categories of fragrances, which is your florals are used when, and when would be a good time. So florals are typically a good fragrance to wear generally during a springtime or autumn time, are a good time to wear. I would say that when the transition is happening from summer to monsoon, or summer to spring, or monsoon to spring, that's a good time for you to bring out these kind of fragrances, because they will actually kind of work very well in that climate. Now, fresh is, I would say that it's a everyday fragrance. Typically you can wear it for office. Summer fragrances are fresh fragrances. Holiday, beach, and all of that is your fresh fragrance. Woody brings out, or woody fragrances really good when the temperatures are much colder, or start to transition into colder times, like autumn season, or slight winter time is a good time to wear woody fragrances, or in the evenings, right? Orientals are very good, especially in cold climates or cold weather, because in the night, for example, when you wear vanilla and all of that, it works much better than how that in the daytime happens, right? Now, a lot of beginners also wear fragrances. If they like Blue de Chanel, they'll wear it in the morning, they'll wear it in the night, and all of that, and then complain saying, I'm not getting performance, all of that, right? Now, you need to understand where you need to wear these fragrances. Now, when you wear a fragrance which is summer fragrance and you are indoors, it's not going to work, because it will work well when the sun is there outside, when the sun rays hit your skin, and when your skin temperature changes, that's when the fragrance opens up. So that's very important, why you need to wear the right type of fragrances in the right places and in the right occasions, right? So that is the most important part of why you generally have these four categories of fragrances, and typically how they kind of work. Okay, so let's move to the next part on this category and think about what we need to talk. Right, now the next part that we'll talk about is the colors of bottles and what they indicate, right? Now, typically, a lot of times fragrances will give out, what they mean. Like if you look at a blue kind of a bottle, it's a good indicator to tell you that it's a blue fragrance or it's a fresh fragrance. Okay. Now, fragrances that have got woody notes will have like a brown colored fragrance. Okay. Fragrances that have got green, green vibes like this, for example, Fatan, which is generally a typical green bottle or something like that. Black would basically mean a dark masculine kind of a fragrance, which is a leather, oud kind of a fragrance. And white typically is associated with musk or floral, that kind of a category. So typically you will see blue, you will see green, you will see black, you will see white, sometimes you will see red. Red, I would say that it's more of a party kind of a fragrance or unisex kind of a fragrance. But while this is not the by and large of it and saying that this is exactly supposed to be this way, this is mostly the case in most categories of fragrances. If you look at even this, this is basically a fragrance which is oud, right? And that's why it's in a more brown, dark, more masculine kind of a fragrance, I would say. So that's why it's in this particular bottle. Now, when you look at bright peach, which is orange in color, it will tell you that it's mostly a floral, fruity kind of a fragrance. Whereas tobacco vanille, for example, is more of a gentleman's dark evening wear kind of fragrance, right? So that's another way to identify from the bottles what kind of fragrances they are. Like I said, it's mostly accurate, not necessarily 100% accurate. Okay, let's go on to the next part. The next thing to know is what are clones, what are inspired versions, and what are alts, okay, or what are alternatives. Okay, now let's understand that. Clones are fragrances which are exactly cloning from the original to the dupe, okay, which is basically, in this case, this can be called as a clone because this is trying to imitate, tobacco vanille from Tom Ford by the same type of bottle, the same type of scent profile and all of that. That's a clone, right? What is an inspired version? Now, inspired version is a fragrance that will take certain elements of this particular fragrance and make certain changes to it and build on it. Okay, so that is a inspired version. Okay, a lot of times you will find inspired versions also. Now, a lot of clone houses also use the word inspired versions because it is easier for them to say inspired versions than saying clones. Okay, clones would basically means a copy paste, right? But an inspired version means, oh, I've taken inspiration from this fragrance and I've built something on my own, right? So that is an inspired version with slight changes. Now, this is something that you will observe in a lot of Middle Eastern houses, right? Like your Latafas, your Armaf and all of that. They will never call themselves as clone, they will call themselves as inspired version. Like, for example, in the video of Sublime, I said that rose is at the top on that particular fragrance, but on the Kayali Eden apple, rose is at the bottom. So they will change the notes here and there and call it inspired, but typically it's the same fragrance that they're trying to build upon. Now, what's an alternative? An alternative is basically a replacement of that particular fragrance. Now, if you like David of Cool Water, an alternative of this would be something like Upsilon's, some blue fragrance, right? It's an alternative. Okay, it might not necessarily be the same type, same smelling. It might be on the same type of DNA that this particular fragrance could be. Like another good example would be if you say blue fragrances. Give me an example of blue fragrances. Alternatives for blue fragrances would be, for Blue de Chanel, an alternative would be Dear Sauvage, because while they are not the same scent, they are alternatives in the same category, right? So that is alternatives versus clones versus what are inspired fragrances. The next point that we need to talk about is basically skin chemistry. Okay, now some people, or not some people, most of the time, this is the typical discussion that happens, that I bought this fragrance and this is not even lasting 2 hours on my skin, but the reviewer is saying it lasts 6 hours, 8 hours. Why does it happen? Okay, few reasons. One, everybody's skin tone is different. Okay, now for you to try this, take a fragrance that you have, put it on your skin and put it on another person's skin right next to you and smell, and you will immediately notice that there are certain notes that are very prominent on yours, but on that person's it will be different. Okay, the lasting on yours will be different and the lasting on that person's will be different. Why? Because every skin chemistry is different. The body heat, your food habits, okay, your living environment, your humidity, your climate play a huge role in how a fragrance performs and works. So, typically two people will not have identical performance. When a reviewer says that, okay, this particular fragrance lasts so long, he's talking about his experience, which could be different for his, home environment, his weather conditions, his state of mind, a lot of things, right? Now, that could be very different from the person who's testing it. So, it will be those elements that will also cause not for you to, get good, performance. Second is one of the good or better ways to try is try it on apparel, right? Because on apparel, the lasting will be a little longer again. So you can try this on apparel, which will generally last a little longer. People also say that you should moisturize yourself and then put fragrances. Probably helps a little, I guess. So you can definitely try that. I generally do that because I take a little bit of moisturizer, I put it on, and then I apply my fragrances. So probably maybe the lasting is slightly different. Okay. Again, certain times you also go nose blind. You don't smell, but the next person will be able to smell because your nose has kind of got a olfactory fatigue where it can't take that fragrance anymore, right? So these are some reasons why you might think that fragrance is not lasting, but there could be could be some reasons why this might be happening, right? So we kind of covered up until skin chemistry and apparel. Now let's look at what is a Chaper and what is a fougere, and kind of take this journey forward.